Hi BookTube! So today I'm going to do something a little different. I haven't really seen anyone do it on BookTube as of yet. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to recommend to you some of my favourite pieces of medieval literature that I've studied during my degree, and hopefully inspire some of you to read some of these really old pieces of literature, because they are awesome. The video is going to be split into two parts. One part is going to be focusing on Anglo-Saxon literature, and the other part is going to be mostly focusing on late medieval literature. I realise there's quite a big gap in the middle for the Central Middle Ages or the High Middle Ages, but I haven't really studied a lot of them, and I hope to fix that during my MA, but I don't feel comfortable enough suggesting anything from that period. So this is going to be from early medieval and late medieval. Okay, so first of all, Anglo-Saxon literature. During my degree, I embarked on one module where it was focused on Anglo-Saxon poetry, and I think it was my favourite module that I did throughout my whole degree. I think they are some of the most evocative and just beautiful, like intricate. It's just like, it makes me speechless, because when people refer to the Anglo-Saxons and that period as the Dark Ages, it really isn't. And the Anglo-Saxons were tremendously sophisticated. It was no way a dark age. There's been proof of travel across continents and trade, and they made such intricate pieces of jewellery and armour and swords. And this is really reflected in the literary culture of the Anglo-Saxons. I can't contain my love for them, and I really am looking forward to studying more during my masters. My favourite is the Exeter book. There's a lot of elegies or elegiac poetry, and two of my favourites are The Wanderer and The Seafarer. I recommend reading either of them. They're very beautiful, they're quite short. Another great Anglo-Saxon poem is The Dream of the Rood. It's probably one of my favourites. It's probably one of my favourite poems ever. I also warn you that a lot of medieval literature is steeped in religious ideology and religious themes. Most of it Christian, because most of the things that were written out were composed in monasteries, and manuscripts originate from those sorts of places, so it's natural that a lot of the source material that we have is religious in theme. The Dream of the Rood is an early dream vision about a dreamer that sees the rood, which is the crucifix, or the tree that Christ was crucified upon. He hears the cross itself speaking and relaying its own experience of the crucifixion, and it's really, really beautiful, depending on what translation you get, but all of them across the board are amazing, so I'd highly recommend you read one of those. Otherwise, there's The Wanderer and The Seafarer, both of which are great. Another obvious one is all of the Anglo-Saxon riddles. The Anglo-Saxons apparently were really, really into their riddles, and they are some of the most amazing variety of subject matter really in these riddles, ranging from bawdy subjects like kind of sex and genitalia to the meaning of life and creation itself, and they encompass a kind of cornucopia of just earthly life, and they're very, very good and very interesting to look at. Of course, a really popular Anglo-Saxon poem, probably the most famous of them all, is Beowulf. I would highly recommend Seamus Heaney's translation, which is generally accepted as being one of the best, if not the best, and it's very, very good, very poetic, but still it fits in with the kind of Old English tradition. He keeps in the kind of form of the Anglo-Saxon poem, and it's very in keeping with the original, which is great. If you're into history at all and you want to kind of find out a bit about like Anglo-Saxon history, then I would highly recommend you read The Ecclesiastical History of the English Peoples, written by the Venerable Bede. Bede is actually usually kind of accepted to be the first historian in England, at least, and yeah, so it's meant to be very, very good. I've read some of it, I want to read all of it, but yeah, it's a good thing to pick up and dip into if you're interested in history. I've done at least 4 modules on specialising in late medieval literature or drama, so I'm very much more comfortable with these texts and reading these texts. They're actually written in Middle English, which is it's a bit of a job at first to read, but once you get used to it, it's written kind of phonetically, and there's a few words that you won't know. Depending on where the original source comes from in the country, England, it's kind of harder or easier to read. Or there's loads of like modern translations of these texts as well. First of all, one of the most famous late medieval texts would be the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. I'm going to name a couple of these, the ones I thought that I've read and that I thought were my favourites. The first of which being actually the general prologue to the whole Canterbury Tales. It's an example of a state satire. It's really good. It's funny. It's looking at these different pilgrims and describing them and how they don't really mesh well with who they're meant to be and who their positions and their occupations define them, and how they kind of live outside those traditional definitions of those. Some of my favourite tales are The Knight's Tale, which is a tale of chivalric romance and knightly prowess, set in a kind of faraway land. The Wife of Bath, which is a Arthurian romance with a twist. It's very good if you're into feminism, or kind of like to kind of see a woman have her say, and like how women were kind of perceived at this time. And then my actual favourite Canterbury Tale that I've read so far, haven't actually read all of them, I know, I'm sorry, but my favourite one that I've read so far is The Pardoner's Tale. If you've read Harry Potter, actually, the tale of the three brothers in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is very loosely, and I stress loosely, but very loosely based on The Pardoner's Tale. And if you read The Pardoner's Tale, then you can kind of tell. If you don't want to read the Middle English for the Canterbury Tales, there's a really good prose translation in modern English written by Peter Ackroyd, who's he's a really good historian. He's written loads of books, but it actually flows really well, and it's very in keeping with the kind of feel of the original as well. So if you don't feel like reading it in Middle English, then I'd highly recommend that. A very popular genre in the medieval period was the dream vision. I previously mentioned about the Dream of the Rood, which is a very early example, but there's a couple of other examples that I'm going to say. My favourite is Pearl by the Pearl poet, or the Gawain poet. It's very beautifully written. It's about a dreamer that is a father that has recently lost his young daughter, and it's kind of framed as a metaphor or an allegory about him losing his pearl, and there's multiple interpretations as well, but that's kind of the general main accepted one. Another one is Piers Plowman. This is for people that want a bit of a challenge. It's quite long and there's multiple layers to this dream vision, so it can get pretty confusing, but it's a pretty epic piece of work, so I'd highly recommend anyone read it if you're interested in the medieval period. There's a couple of Chaucerian dream visions, such as the Book of the Duchess or the Parliament of Fowls. There's a kind of half dream vision by this French woman called Christine de Pizan, and her work is called The Book of the City of Ladies. This is a really good one, again, if you're into feminism, because she's actually deemed the first woman to kind of live strictly from her pen, and she wrote for court, for herself, for patrons. She wrote, that was her entire career. And the Book of the City of Ladies is very feminist in subject matter. It challenges the traditional perception of women at the time of writing, and kind of really shows Christine de Pizan's frustration with male writers' depiction of women. And it's really refreshing to read that, although it is depressing how some of the things that she says in it are kind of still relevant today, like 600, 700 years later, which is great. Well done, society. Women, like another one for like fans of women writers is the Book of Marjorie Kemp. She's a funny old lass, Marjorie Kemp. Deemed one of the first autobiographies, although people argue that it's a kind of auto-hagiography, which is when you write yourself as a saint, or like her kind of life reflects the life of Christ a lot, and she has visions of Mary and Christ and stuff like that. But they're very hyper-emotional visions, and it's quite interesting. She's a bit odd, Marjorie. We love her all the same. Sorry if the frame is a little different. I realised that I actually turned off the camera without recommending one of possibly the best examples of medieval literature that I wanted to save until the end, which is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by the Gawain poet, or the Pearl poet. You'll see a theme. He's, we assume a he, we never know, but I would really recommend Sir Gawain and the Green Knight for anyone that really wants to kind of experience the typical medieval adventure story. King Arthur and the Round Table and monsters and mythical beings. It's very typical of what you would maybe imagine when you thought of kind of medieval literature as a kind of vague genre, if that makes sense. And it is wonderful. It has a lot of messages. It's very immersed in its own time. There's references to the Order of the Garter at the end, a kind of chivalric brotherhood started by King Edward III. And it's very much an Arthurian romance. If you don't read anything else medieval, you should really read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It was most people's favourites when we studied it. It's really fun. There's a lot of translations of it. Might be a bit difficult to read in the original. Other than that, if you are interested in Arthurian romance or the Arthurian legend, then there's obviously Le Morte d'Arthur, which is the kind of chronicle like story of the life of King Arthur and Merlin and the Round Table and the Holy Grail, composed by Sir Thomas Malory. I think he was in prison when he actually composed it as well, so there's a little tidbit of information that you didn't need. But yes, so if you're interested in King Arthur, which is kind of the epitome of what we'd seem like kind of medieval chivalry and legends and stuff, then Sir Gawain and the Green Knight or Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, can't really go wrong with those. And that's about it for me. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit different. Please don't be scared. Medieval literature is fun. Yes. Please comment if you decide to read any, or message me, or say what you liked. Or if you have a recommendation of medieval literature for me, that would be amazing. I'd really, really enjoy that. So yeah, happy reading. Please subscribe, leave a comment, like this video, all that jazz that people say at the end of videos. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon.